Once again, thank you so much, Morne and Carolina. As Morne mentioned, my name is Daniela Espinal, and I'm super happy to be here with you guys. And thank you all for tuning in and taking your first step towards enhancing your English studying journey. Not your English learning journey, your English studying journey. And that's the first thing that we're going to start off by doing today. We're going to start off by asking ourselves a question. Am I the problem or is it English? And no, we're not Taylor Swift. We're not the problem. The actual problem is the system, like how we were taught to be able to learn the English language. But before we go into that, I would like to tell you a bit more about myself and the reason why I am passionate about the process of actually studying the English language. As Morna mentioned, my name is Daniela. Um, I'm the founder of Lounge. Lounge is basically a platform in which we connect teachers and students that want to learn the English language, focusing in a conversational approach with teachers that have experience in this field. Our characteristic that distinguishes us is that we are able to enhance the students' English studying capabilities through an approach that is centered around conversations. Because, hey, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is that we want to speak the English language, whether it is to land an amazing remote job opportunity like the ones that JobDoc offer us, or to land a scholarship. The end purpose of any journey always has a goal. And in the case of English, we're always aspiring towards great and bigger goals. So how is it that this is going to work today? Before we start the actual conference, I would like you to remove three main thoughts from your mind, because this is not only going to be a process of learning about how to really start studying the English language, but also how to remove the current mindset that we have of our approach of language learning. And how is it that we're going to do this? Well, the three main things that we have to remove is the first one, if you're looking for an easy answer to learn English really, really quickly, probably this is not the webinar for you. No, most likely there are a few people that would say, well, to be honest, I'm looking to learn English really quickly and we'll want to leave the webinar, but trust me, the information that I'm going to share today is worth the wait. Then second, if you're thinking about the goal, only about the goal and your, we could say the end of your journey, also that's something that I would like you all to remove today. Today we're not going to think about the cost of the result, we could say, of the process, but rather of the process itself. So let's forget a bit our about the scholarship that we're trying to land, about the job opportunity. Let's just think about where I'm currently at in my English process and where I want to go, starting from point A to point B, which we're going to dive into that a bit later. And lastly, stop thinking about all of the language gurus that probably have told you that you're going to learn English in 2 to 3 months, because they're definitely lying. It's impossible to learn English fluently in only 3 months. And someone that tells you otherwise, they're just trying to deceive you. And today, and what characterizes Lounge is we provide the real and, we could say, the honest part of English learning. Okay. But to be able to do that, it's important that we make a comparison into what we're doing at the moment and what we're going to start doing after this conference. Okay. So, what we have at the moment, and probably you haven't even realized, is that you have been approaching your English journey as an English learning journey rather than an English studying journey. Okay, so today we're going to see the difference. But now you're probably thinking, well, Daniela, that's actually the same. It's not. And let's take a step back and think about the bigger picture. Now, when we think about English, of course, the main phrase that comes to our mind is, okay, I'm going to learn English. If I'm thinking about another languages, I'm going to learn Italian, learn Chinese. This is the, we would say that, like, the set structure of train of thought, right? But in reality, what happens when we are learning a language is that it depends a lot on the emotion that you're feeling at the moment. Maybe you decided that you wanted to learn English because of the goal that you want to pursue, or you decided to start to learn English because you wanted to communicate with your crush that only speaks English. But what happens when you do it in that way, in which you only approach it as a learning process, is that it depends on human motivation. What does that mean? That it doesn't depend on your commitment of a set path of structure and steps that you're going to follow, regardless of the current outcomes that you're having at the moment. And what we actually don't know is that most learners don't fail because of the lack of, we could say, constant steps, but it's mainly because of the lack of motivation. But why? Why is the reason? This is because we depend too much on what we're being able to see at the moment. We are so used to getting fast results. Of course, I send a picture to a friend, they receive it immediately. I want to order food, I receive it in around 10 to 15 minutes, but it's something that happens fast, right? We're so used to that we expect even learning processes to happen that way. And the reason there is that we were actively taught how to learn, but we were never actively taught how to study. So today we're going to shift that perspective. We're going to think about and shift from learning to actually studying. But what's the difference? Again, you might still not be convinced and still be saying, Daniela, bye. It's the same thing. It's actually not the same thing. On one hand, we have learning. Learning is the outcome of a set process, meaning what you obtain when you learn English. You obtain fluency, you obtain confidence, you obtain the remote job opportunity, you obtain the scholarship. But what happens when you study? It's the process, is what really lies in between those days in which you don't want to wake up and review your vocabulary. It's the days where you wake up and you attend your classes even though you don't want to. That process lies within practice, repetition, memorization, and actually accepting that the English studying journey is not one that we're going to enjoy every single day, but one that is necessary to be able to remain competitive in the current world. So you see the difference now? We have learning, which is the outcome, fluency and confidence, and we have studying, the process, the practice, the repetition. Now, let's put it in a different way to see if we are actually getting it. So let's think about whenever we're learning a new musical instrument. We do not learn the guitar by listening, right? We learn it by practicing. We learn it by studying the chords, just locking ourselves in our rooms, maybe 1 week, trying to repeat the same chords, and finally being able to play the song, right? That's the same thing with English. We do not only leave it as a result of our sudden actions, but rather as active and intentional decisions that progressively make us be able to see or show the results by speaking, by reading, by listening, and understanding. So we have now a clear perspective. Studying is actually active, intentional, and consistent. Now, what is the issue then if I'm only learning English and I'm not studying English? Because maybe you might also be thinking right now, well, I kind of see your point, Daniela, but why is it wrong? Why is it that I cannot continue this way? So the thing is here is that what most people do wrong and that they do not realize that they're doing wrong is that in the actions in which they are thinking that they're studying, they're actually still learning. Meaning that even though we could say, the intention behind the action is still for the purpose of improving your English, it's still not the right one. But not because the decision is incorrect, but the approach of how you do it is the incorrect one. So let's give a few examples. The first one is passive consumption, sorry. So in this intention, we think about Netflix, we think about podcasts or a YouTube video. Yes, of course. If I put Netflix, let's say I put How I Met Your Mother or Friends as the sitcom that is going to be playing in the back, it's going to enhance my listening skills. But it's not something that I'm actively sitting down, reading the subtitles, writing every single word that I don't know down, and then memorizing it. Or do we do that? We don't. We just expect that by constantly watching every episode, one day in the future, we're going to be able to understand all of the jokes, all of the meanings, all of the double sense phrases, but we do not actively sit down and say, okay, let me write down this phrase. I'm going to research it afterwards and I'm going to memorize it and I'm going to start implementing it in my daily use, right? All right, let's go to a next point. Another thing that people do wrong is that we do not put any clear goals or structure. What does this mean? It means that whenever we start with this process of trying to enhance our English, it's we see English as this huge, immense thing, which is actually something that we touched base in our previous webinar. We had the first part of this webinar that I highly recommend that you check it out either through JobDoc's website or through their YouTube channel, in which we were able to dissect how is it that English is constructed and how I can recognize in which level I am at the moment. So when we start our process, if we start it without thinking about where I am in my process, or if I'm staring at this huge topic without knowing what it is composed of, how or what techniques are used to be able to enhance it, it's something that lacks structure, it lacks clarity, which makes us, in consequence, same, a result that doesn't have a clear goal or structure. We just go through life without actually sitting down and writing down, okay, today I'm going to target this, tomorrow this, which gives us a bit more clarity. But for now, we're not going to think about how we're going to solve this. I just want you to listen to this and identify which areas of your life and which areas of your routine you're actually doing wrong by what I'm describing. Number three, we can say that we always want to skip grammar. Now, I understand that grammar is something that is annoying, that is difficult, that is challenging, but it's something that we cannot skip if we want to master the English language. And I'm pretty sure that a few of my students are actually here today, and they know, they will know that I'm not lying today. At Launch, what we do is that we are honest in your process. We are not going to tell you, no, you don't need to learn this, or no, this, you can skip it. What we do is that if you, let's say, if we have a trick for a certain topic, we're going to tell you, you know what? You don't have to memorize this exactly how it is. Here's a trick. But there are certain things in English that there's no exception. There's no easy way out. There's no pathway. You have to sit down and memorize whatever it is that it's in front of you, whether it is a verb tense or whether it is a sentence structure. There are just some aspects of the English language, like any other language as well, that don't have any shortcuts. So skipping grammar is definitely not a right idea. Now, no review system is similar to what we have in the second point. It's something that lacks clarity. There's no clear goals or structure, meaning that even though we think that we're making progress, we're actually not making any progress at all. And lastly, we start memorizing vocabulary, but in isolation. What does this mean? Maybe you have stood in that point in your life at a time in which you say, okay, today I'm going to memorize 50 words in English, and I'm going to immediately just memorize its definition. Of course, the like the immediate translation from English to Spanish or English to your native language, right? But what does that create when you do this? What this creates is just a mental safe space or comfort zone in which you will always and go towards the word that is in your native language. And what will this create later on in your process? It's that whenever you're trying to create a sentence or paragraph, those tiny seconds in which you're thinking, what is the correct word in Spanish or in your native language, you actually lose confidence. And of course, you lose the traction that you have to be able to deliver a high quality either English sentence or English paragraph. Therefore, this is definitely something that I would recommend just avoiding at all cost. So as you see, this is not about rethinking our entire life existence, but rather setting new ideas, setting new objectives that with our current motivation combined with discipline, we are going to be able to have a real result. So this is mainly about a mindset shift. So as we're talking, we're going to think now as musicians, as athletes. We're going to practice daily, not perfectly. This means that only because one day I skipped a session, or only because one day I didn't have time to repeat or to memorize something that I learned from my class, that doesn't mean that you're going to throw away all of the progress that you have had over the past couple of years or months. Okay, so this is really important. You're going to practice daily, not perfectly. Let's also think about the fact that when we compare both aspects, we're thinking about learning and studying And the main characteristic that we have been able to distinguish is the following. It's that learning is something that is emotional, given that it depends, it highly depends on your motivation, it highly depends on what you want to achieve. Therefore, there's too many factors combined that is making you or pushing you to commit to this process. But studying is something that is strategic, that regardless of what you're feeling that day, you know that has to be done, that it will be done in a certain way, and that you will do it because the result of the hard work is worth it. Okay. Let's also remember something really crucial here, which is success is repetition, not talent. Okay. And the person or anyone who tells you that they're just a magician in languages, they're lying. If someone tells you they're a magician in or a prodigy in whatever they're trying to say, that's a lie. Okay, success is most likely repetition, not talent. Of course, there are certain scenarios in which there's some people that are talented and that don't need that much repetition, right? But if you're a mortal like me, you will need to repeat and stick to the plan, right? So all right, enough about the chit chat of what's the difference between studying and learning. Let's actually get deep into how can I switch this, right? This is probably the question that you're asking yourself at the moment. We have to first identify then four main pillars of studying English. So remember, we're removing the learning part. We're sticking to studying. How actually is it that I'm going to start my English studying journey? All right. So with these four pillars that we have to be familiarized to what each and every single one of them mean and how is it that they're going to be a factor that will lead me towards success. The first one is input. What do I mean by input? Input is anything that is surrounding you that is going to be 100% in English, okay? How can I make sure that my environment is 100% in English, you might ask? I'm living in Honduras. I'm living in Brazil. How is it that I'm going to create this isolated environment if, of course, people are not speaking English around me? That is your responsibility to create and adapt your environment towards that. How? Well, we're going to adapt an environment in which the environment there is 100% in English. It can be either through live sessions like the ones that we host at Lounge, or it can be just things or actions and decisions that you take to be able to enhance or commit to that process. So as an example, you can read or listen daily, okay? Comprehensible input. Let's put an example of 50 minutes per day. You're going to start reading a certain chapter of a book that you have wanted to read for a while. Okay, but the idea here is not only to passively read it and just go across the plot and the characters without just getting really into it. It's actually saying, okay, I'm going to use this time intentionally and being able to really sit down. And you're going to hear this phrase a lot in this webinar because you really have to sit down and remove any distraction whatsoever, put your phone in airplane mode, and really dedicate that time as your time to study the language, okay? So input 15 minutes per day, either if it's reading or listening. Trust me, that's going to make a huge difference in the progress that you're going to be seeing in a daily basis. Now, let's talk about output. All right, we already saw the input part, but what happens with the output? This is usually the part or the area where most of students feel a bit attacked or they feel challenged by this aspect, right? Why? Because it's really emotional and really mental. Why? Because challenges such as your maybe confidence, maybe you're thinking if your accent is not sounding that well or your pronunciation. But in this part specifically, we have to remove the idea that we are going to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect. It's impossible because this is, for some of us, this is our third, even fourth language. Okay. You should even feel proud of the fact that you know more than one language, more than one native language, right? So let's think about the fact that the things that we are feeling insecure about are actually the things that should make us feel proud about ourselves, right? Just sit down and take a minute to recognize that actually the idea or the fact that you are able to speak another language is already a success, even though if we're making tiny mistakes along the way, okay? So how is it that we're going to manage this? First, removing the expectation that we have to be perfect, and second, You have to start doing it regardless of the fact that you're still going to be afraid. Because of course, yes, I can tell you, remove that expectation, but it won't happen out of the blue, right? It won't happen tomorrow only because this is the first time you're meeting me. Of course, I'm not going to magically trick you or push you to having much more confidence in yourself. So that confidence is going to come as a result of the actions and decisions that you take every single day. But at least I hope that this first step that you attended this conference helps as that trigger or as that thing that tells you you can do this and you can start. Okay. I have seen people, many students struggle. They have started, let's say, only being able to speak for 15 seconds or 20 seconds, and now they are students that are in the best universities in different areas of the world that are able to give lectures 100% in English because they decided that it was time to start studying rather than learning. So how is it they were able to achieve this? Starting to get output in English, removing your expectation of wanting to be perfect, actually starting it by how? Well, you have to start speaking and writing daily. It doesn't matter with who you speak, where you speak, or to who you speak, it doesn't matter. The thing is that you have to start doing it. Something I tell my students a lot is that sometimes you're going to feel that you're crazy because I always tell them, talk to yourself, just talk out loud. You can pretend that you're in an interview, think that you're with Jimmy Fallon in an interview, and just talk and talk and talk. It doesn't matter. Okay, what the idea here is that you're able to just get the English out of your mouth, right? It doesn't matter if it doesn't come perfectly the first time around. All right, the purpose of this is to be able to just do it, because as you do it and as and you increase the, let's say, the amount of time that you invest towards this, you're going to notice that your confidence is going to increase and your fluency, of course, your confidence is going to increase, and then your fluency, of course, is going to increase as well. Okay, how can you do this? Well, you can record voice notes, you can record a daily journal, you can record a daily routine, you can start posting in English, even though if you don't have the TikTok or the Instagram in a public manner, you can just have one only for yourself and just start doing it just for fun, but as a motivation for you to start and to commit to something that will be fun for you, but at the same time is going to be showing you active signs of success and progress in your process. Okay. All right. So then we have two more pillars. Third one is review. Now, in this case, it's the part that we usually want to skip because we think that by only attending classes, by only doing my input, doing the output, that's enough. But bad news, it's not enough. Okay. We really have to be intentional about the topics, about the phrases, about the structures that we put into our daily routines and our daily practice sessions. By how? By intentionally reviewing whatever is it that we are learning. There's not such an easy topic, or there's not a difficult topic that we should skip. Okay, there's always going to be a space for you to have the time to review and be able to get the best of that topic or of that structure if you do it this way. How are you going to do this? We're going to go to the old school. Usually, I always motivate my students to just, I know that technology is something really important at the moment, but I am really old school, so I always suggest my students to go back to flashcards, notebooks, okay? Write the stuff down, write the words down, write the structures down. It's not the same, or at least for me, it's not the same to get your iPad and write it down and then getting your notebook and actually writing it down. I don't know. There's something about writing it down in actual paper that feels different for me, or that does something in my brain, but that has definitely helped me a lot, not only in my process of learning languages, but also in my success, either academically and professionally. Writing stuff down has definitely been a game changer. Okay. So I highly suggest that tomorrow you go to the store and buy some flashcards. You can start by doing flashcards of your vocabulary, or by the sentence, or of the sentence structures that you're learning, or any grammar topic that you're currently seeing in class that you definitely need to memorize. As I mentioned at Lounge, we're going to tell you the hints or the shortcuts when they exist, but when there is topic that there is no escape, we're still going to tell you. And that's really important. Please get yourself a teacher that is not going to um, lie to you or tell you, no, yes, you can skip this, when in reality it's crucial, or someone that is going to tell you, no, you can learn this in 2 weeks, or you can be fluent in English in 3 months, because they're definitely lying. Okay. And this is really important, that you are able to get someone or have the companion of someone that is going to be honest with you along this process. Okay. And then number 4, which is our last pillar of today, is a system. What does this mean? And you might or most likely recall the point that I mentioned in our slide before, which is sometimes we lack clarity or we lack structure. And this is because we don't have systems in place. How is it that we're going to establish systems? We're going to approach the entire goal as something that can be divided by time. What do I mean by this? Instead of saying, oh my God, I have 3 years of learning English, that can overwhelm anyone, right? Of course, if I'm thinking about 3 years, I will want to give up, because that's too much time. So let's just think about, all right, what can I do today to get a bit closer? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do the next day? And so on and so forth. So approach every week as something independently. If I messed up this week, I still have next week, and so on and so forth. But in that way, you also remove the emotional aspect of saying, oh my God, I have to commit to this for 3 years to be able to achieve something. No, just stick to the week and say, this week, my goal is to learn the difference of these conditional sentences, an example. So I'm going to do this. On Monday, I'm going to learn the definition. On Tuesday, I'm going to do some exercises. On Wednesday, I'm going to do some repetition. Okay, so establish systems that work for you. That's something also really important. You might have listened to some of the examples that I have given that work for me, but what works for me is not what works for you. All right, because every single student, of course, we have different techniques, or we have different preferences of how we feel comfortable when learning any topic, regardless if it's a language or if it's a history topic. We feel comfortable in different ways. Okay, so create systems that work for you rather than trying to copy the systems that work for your classmate or that work for your friend. Okay, that's something really, really important. And something that I also want to mention that it's crucial is to track your progress. I have lost count of the amount of times when students have told me that they feel that maybe they still lack confidence. That even though they see the results, they feel sometimes shy. Why is it? Because they're not tracking their progress. Even though, let's say, if you have a teacher that is there with you and that constantly is telling you, congratulations, see, you got, let's say, 100% in this test. It's not the same when someone else tells you than when you actually keep track of the small achievements that you have been obtaining so far. Why? Because if someone else tells you, you're always going to doubt them, because we're humans. We're always going to say, oh, she's just giving me compliments because she wants me to stick to my lesson, right? It's different than if we do our individual, just being able to collect what we are doing every day and seeing, am I actually achieving what I wanted to do? Let's go back to the example that I gave of the conditional sentences. Did I understand this 200% when I arrived to Friday? On Monday, was I able to understand the definition? Okay. Track your progress, because if not, it's going to be just a lot of work that you're investing every day without seeing the results. And because again, we're humans, so even if we know that a process is going to take time, the idea or the fact that we're going to see at least small sources of progress every now and then works tremendously, all right, for our discipline. And of course, the motivation, that even though discipline is more important, we still need motivation to be able to continue working in our discipline. All right, so based on those 4 pillars, which are the tools and habits that we can start implementing into our daily routine to be able to have success? Now, this is a question that a lot of my students also ask me, which is, besides classes, besides private lessons or group lessons, are there any important tools that you would recommend to make this process smoother? And I would definitely recommend tools that not make the process easier, but rather that make the process much more intentional. And there is where the difference lies. As I mentioned, usually when we're thinking about English, we're thinking about learning. But I don't want you to think about learning now. I want you to think about how I can study. Okay, so my recommendations are based on that. How can I study English better? So the tools that I would recommend, of course, are the following. Some of them are really, really common, so I'm pretty sure that you have already heard them before and that are not going to be something new to you within this conference, but maybe the way that you implement them might be new. Okay, so for reading, writing, listening, speaking, there's certain things that we have to take into consideration. Of course, the way that I'm going to study one aspect of the English language is not the same way as I'm going to study another aspect, right? So the importance here is that you identify tools that work for you in each and every single one of these aspects. Hence, you cannot only focus on speaking and then forget about writing, for example, or you cannot only focus on writing and then forget about listening. Okay, that's something that I want to really emphasize today is when you think about studying English, think about all of the factors that make English the language that it is today. Okay, if you would like to review that one more time, I would like you to recommend you to go and check out the first part of this webinar in JobTalks website, okay, in which you're going to be able to see much more detail of how this is divided. All right, so the tools that I would recommend specifically for writing and speaking are the following, which is Grammarly. Grammarly, as you know, is something that immediately gives you the correction of the phrase or of the sentence that you're writing. And how are you going to use this intentionally? The idea here is that you use this for the writing practice. Let's give an example. If you're practicing writing that day, and you're trying to write a paragraph about your experience working in a United States-based business, for example, and you want to write your experience and be able to express yourself easily, try to do this, start writing your introduction paragraph, then the body, then the conclusion, and then try to see where you made, of course, mistakes, which were the words that you wrote incorrectly, which were the sentences that you maybe wrote that didn't make sense. Everything that is, of course, underlined in red, write it down and see what is the solution that Grammarly recommends you. And don't use this to only click it and then forget about it and say, perfect, right? No. Actually, as I mentioned this phrase a lot, sit down, write that down, and actually intentionally see it and try to understand why is it that this is wrong? Of course, in a word that you wrote incorrectly, that would be an easy fix, right? You just memorize the correct way of writing it. But if it's a sentence structure, what are you going to do with that? Okay, you got it wrong. So how can I know how to correct it? Which would be the correct way? All right, yes, the tool is giving it to me, but how can I be sure? All right, so those are examples that if you have, of course, a teacher that is going with this process, along this process with you, you bring this question to the class and you ask them, hey, Miss, why is it that this and this and that, right? And of course, the teacher is going to be there and support you and answer whatever the question it is. Okay, so that is something really important on how you can make sure to use this tool in a smarter way. Okay, there are other tools that I have written down in these slides, but because of the time that we have for this webinar, I'm not going to go that much in deep or in depth, sorry, or in detail for each and every single one of them. But we're going to be sending each and every single one of you a cheat sheet that you're going to have access to it right after the end of this webinar, alongside with the recording of the webinar itself, where you will be able to review every single detail that we have discussed during this conference, and that you're going to have, of course, as well, the tools that I have in the slide. All right, so if there is any question that arises in regards to the tools, you can always reach out to me through LinkedIn or through the official channels of Launch, and I'm going to be there answering any questions that you might have. But we still have a bit more to go today. So let's think now about habits, okay? We already talked about tools, but let's think about habits. Usually, whenever we set a habit, it's something that we do without even actually thinking about it, right? We just do it because we know we have to do it and because it's already part of our routine. So that is exactly what we're going to start implementing for our English studying journey, okay? We're going to recognize a cue, which is going to be followed by a routine, and lastly, a reward. So how we're going to implement that to English? Let's give an example. So we study after breakfast and we reward with a song, for example. In my case, I'm a huge fan of Taylor Swift, and most likely you already noticed that because I mentioned her in my first two sentences of this webinar. So, if you know that you're a huge fan of an artist, or if you enjoy watching a certain TV show or something like that, use that as your reward. I know that if I study after breakfast, I have the chance to go and scroll TikTok for a while, right? Or I'm going to listen to my favorite artist without any let's say any worry. Or if you let's say that you love sushi, right? All right, let's say I'm going to put this study plan for this week. If I achieve it, I'm going to go and get my favorite sushi roll by the end of this week. Okay, it's important that we start intentionally planning those things that are going to keep the discipline, but at the same time the motivation going. And at one point in our journey, there's going to come a time in which we're not going to even realize that this is ingrained in our habit and in our daily routine. So this is just the start and how to uh, change your usual ways, but it's not something that you're going to have to give yourself a sushi roll every week for the rest of your life, right? Unless you really like sushi, but you get what I mean, right? It's just the start of a change in routine, a change of mindset, a change of actions and decisions that are going to make a huge impact in studying with intention. So let's see this example of how you can build your weekly study plan and get this going. All right. So the intention here is use the tools wisely and also start implementing habits that make sense and that push me closer to my goals. So, how can I build a weekly study plan for this? As I mentioned, the key here is to think about the aspects that construct the English language. As I mentioned before, and again, I repeat it because it's really, really important. We cannot attack the English studying process if we are not aware of what composes the English language. And I'm pretty sure that you are familiarized with it, but do we really know what each and every single one of these aspects entail? We maybe just know it on the surface, but we really don't know the importance of each and every single one. Okay. So it's really important that you take a time to be able to analyze and see what is it that the listening English aspect has, the grammar, the speaking, the reading and writing, what is it composed of that I have to dissect and add into my goals. Okay, that's the first thing that you have to do. Then the second is have a clear structure. And the clear structure, thankfully, we already have that in our day to day, which is the weeks, the months, the years. So it's already set up for us. We're basically set up for success. What we need to do is just intentionally take the decision to start doing it. So we can divide it in the following way. As you see on screen, we have day, we have focus, and we have an example of an activity. Okay, so the example of this activity, it's going to depend, of course, on the aspect of English that you're going to study that exact day. All right, of course. So, as an example, we have Monday. We're going to focus on listening, and an example activity is we're going to listen to a podcast of 10 minutes. But the importance here is that when you start implementing these study plans, when you start implementing structure and clarity, that you also do not forget about the four pillars that we saw, which were input, output, review. All right. Let's remember that all of these are tied up to what we're seeing. So if we go back and we identify these four pillars, am I really putting it into practice with what I'm implementing in my weekly study plan? I already have the system, but am I really doing the input, the output, and the review, all of that in the same day, regardless of the aspect? So, of course, there's going to be a main activity that is going to target the main aspect of the day, but that doesn't mean that you have to ignore the other factors of English, right? Or the other techniques. So, to give you an example, all right, yes, maybe in this case, on Monday, we're doing listening, we are doing the podcast, okay? In that case, we could say, we can describe it, it's an input, right? We're getting that and constructing that environment for us to have a bit more of an environment in English. But is that enough? No, it's not enough. How can I do an output out of this situation? All right, when I finish this podcast, I will start talking like crazy by myself about the podcast that I just heard. Okay, I'm going to imagine that I'm being interviewed. I'm going to start doing voice notes and sending them to myself, to my own contact on WhatsApp. No one will know. The importance here, or the important thing here, is that you start doing it. It doesn't matter if you look like crazy, okay? So you combine input, you combine output, but what else? You have to review. So it's not enough. And you're going to say, still not enough? Yes, not enough. You have your input, you have your output, but you still have to review. So how can you review a podcast, for example? All right, what you're going to do is that you're going to get the transcript of the podcast. You're going to reread the entire transcript. You're going to underline those phrases that you didn't understand, those phrases that you were like, what is this? Or that had a second meaning, or some words that you didn't understand. And you're going to actively write them down. And once again, the same phrase, sit down and dissect each and every single part of it. Okay. So in that way, you're combining every single pillar, even though the aspect that we're focusing on that day is listening. So what will happen with grammar? Same thing. Tuesday, we're focused on grammar. An example is, all right, we're going to see one grammar rule and 3 examples. Okay, in this case, we have sort of an output. We will have to speak out loud, of course, the grammar rule, the example. How can I do it even much more of an output? I'm going to start talking or creating more sentences out loud. That's the importance. Why are you going to stay in your comfort zone of only writing it down in your notebook? That even though it's important, as I mentioned, but why are you going to stay there if you know that what you struggle with is the speaking part, not only the writing part, right? So important in this case, speak, talk it out loud. All right, how can I have it as an input? Okay, let's do it ourselves. We're going to record ourselves in a voice note, and then I'm going to listen the voice note of my own voice, and I'm going to be able to review it now by analyzing which phrases I said wrong, which words I pronounced incorrectly, and actively and intentionally making a correction of those mistakes. And that's also something really important, because it doesn't matter if we identify that we made a mistake, but if we do not change it, then what's the point, right? And how you're going to create this, you need a companion. You need a teacher that is along your side, or even a system in which you have a study partner. But you have to have someone that also is with you in this process, okay? All right, let's go to the next day. We have Wednesday, which is speaking. We already have, we would say, an output, because we're going to be recording a 1-minute voice memo. You can also transform it into an input by what? Doing the same thing as I mentioned before. You're going to play the voice recording again, listen to the recording, and actually review what you did right, what you did wrong, which is a similar activity that you would do with both reading and writing. In reading, you're going to read it out loud, you're going to record what you're reading, and then you're going to re-listen what you read to identify if you did it correctly. And yes, you still have to review. You will review what you did right, what you did wrong. It's part of the process. And lastly, with writing, you're going to put it into practice by writing, we could say, a paragraph of your week, for example. In this case, you're going to write it down using Grammarly as the example that I mentioned before. Recognize the patterns that you're doing correctly, what you're doing right, and same thing, review it, write it down, repeat it until you are able to master something that used to be extremely difficult for you. Now, what's the final advice, or every single point that I would like to conclude today before we wrap up this conference? Is that you have to pay close attention to every single decision that you make, whether if it looks as a big decision or if it looks as a small one, because every single decision and every single step that you make in this English studying journey matters, okay? And how is it that you're going to approach this? By switching your mindset towards knowing and understanding that you are not in an English learning journey, you're in an English studying journey, one that is intentional, one that is active, and one that you understand that it's going to take a bit of time, but that it's going to be worth it because your goals, your future self is already thanking you because everything that you ever dreamed of is right after just sitting down and studying with intention. So let's remember something. One is that we have to appreciate our progress over perfection. Remember, this is not about becoming the next Shakespeare, right? We do not have to be perfect. The importance here is that every single decision that you take and that every let's say every structure that you put into place, every input, every output, every review session, every system that you have throughout the year, that reminds you that every single day counts, and that even though you might make a mistake in the test that your teacher is going to apply on Friday, that doesn't matter because you know that you did the work. You put in the work during the week. And yes, maybe I made that mistake. But now, yeah, I can thank just the mistake because I know that once I make it, I have to make a commitment that if I make a mistake, I'm never going to make that mistake again. Because if you do it once and then you say, nah, it's going to stay in my brain. Second time you do it again and you still keep doing that mistake week after week after week, what is that? We're just not doing it with intention. Okay. But if you start implementing every single thing that we saw today, that will no longer be the case, even though the process will not be perfect by any means. But that mistake that you made in a test or in a conversation is no longer going to be only a mistake. It's going to be part of your English studying journey. It's going to be, oh, okay, this is a new opportunity for me to write it down in my journal and review it. This is a new opportunity for me to talk about this with my teacher during my classes. Okay, every single opportunity, or better said, every single mistake that you create or that you make, sorry, is a new opportunity for you to have even more space, to have even more topics to review, even more opportunities to be able to implement it in your system. The best advice and last advice before we wrap up, and I'm also going to open up a space for any questions that you might have, whether it is about the job opportunities that JobDoc has available, that I'm pretty sure there's someone behind the scenes supporting us with this. So thank you so much for your help, and everyone at the JobDoc team for making this webinar happen. I'm really, really honored and grateful for your support and your help throughout this time. We're going to be here to answer any of your questions, and also I'm going to be here to answer any question that you might have about Launch and our process in teaching English and actually teaching you how to study it, and of course any question that you might have about the conference itself. Okay, but before we dive into the questions, there's just one more thing that I would like to touch base on, which is the importance and the power of community. So even though we are really strong to be able to commit to all of the processes or all of the steps that I mentioned throughout this almost hour that we are about to conclude today, is that yes, you can do it by yourself, but never, never disregard the importance and the power of community. Why? Because you're going to notice that the best progress happens with, yes, a plan, feedback, a fun structured space, sorry, but most importantly, with practice partners. And that's something I can testify of in any area of my life. Or think about this situation. When have you had the most amount of fun? When you're alone at the park or when you're with your friends? It's always better when you have your community with you, whether it is for learning a language or whether it is to going out to a park. It's always better for community. They remind you that you have to show up. They help you to stay committed. They help you to just realize things that maybe you weren't able to spot before. So even if you have all of the pillars that I mentioned and you follow every single step, the best progress always happens when you have the right people beside you. Okay. So, really important. Yes, combine the plan, combine the feedback, combine a fun, structured space, as I mentioned, but find that people, those practice partners. Doesn't matter if it's only one person or if it's three, it doesn't matter. As long as there's someone that is in the same process or in the same journey that you are, it's definitely going to make a difference. And here is where also Launch falls into place. If you're at the moment identifying any of the things that I mentioned and you were able to recognize, to be honest, this girl, this lady that I just met, she's right. I haven't been intentionally studying English. I have been doing this and that, and definitely maybe I'm not in the right track. Don't worry, we have all been there. And you don't have to keep going into that track, but rather you can take the decision today to intentionally and actively start your process towards enhancing your English studying journey. Okay, it's the right decision. And the good thing is that you're here and that you are going to be able to end this conference and be aware that you can make a change. How we're going to do this? Well, at Lounge, we help you study English, not just learn it. We're going to give you all of the tools, strategies, and methodologies for you to be able to be prepared and ready to land anything that you set your mind to, okay? Whether it is a remote job at a US-based business with JobDuck, for example, or if you want to achieve a scholarship, anything that you set your mind to, it's possible with the power of English. What else can we offer you? Tools, real conversation, system support, and a real community. We have more than 100 cases of success at Lounge that testify to what we're currently doing. And 8 out of 10 students that have graduated at Lounge have achieved their goals. As I mentioned, whether attending university abroad, enhancing their speaking skills at their workplace, or landing a remote job. And that's not because we are doing magic or something. It's because we have been able to crack the code of how English is really studied and how it should be taught, not through repetitions that doesn't make sense, but with an intentional and active study plan fulfilled with teachers that are passionate about what they teach and that are ready to support you in your English studying journey. It's something that definitely is changing lives and that I'm proud to be a part of alongside my co-founder and friend that unfortunately is not able to be here today, Claudia Cardona. Alongside her, we have been doing this and working to construct this already for 3 years. Hence, if you have any questions whatsoever about Lounge and how we can help you to accelerate your English studying journey, you can feel free to contact me either through LinkedIn. You can find me as Daniela Espinal or through the official website of Lounge at www.loungehn.com or on our Instagram as @loungehnd or Facebook as Lounge English Classes for Impact or TikTok or LinkedIn. We're everywhere. Okay. So if you have any question whatsoever about how we can support you, you can definitely contact us through there. Any person that attended this webinar, we're going to be gifting a 1 session free demo class for you to attend only by saying that you attended this webinar. Okay, so if you're here and you want to receive that demo class, just make sure to go to Instagram to @loungehnd, follow us, send us a DM that says, I was at the JobDoc webinar, let us know, and we're going to be giving you as a gift 1 free demo class so you can experience our methodology. With that being said, thank you so much for your attention, for being here. Thank you once again, Carolina and Morne, for your invitation. I'm really happy to have had this time to share with the audience, and also I'm really proud that we are working together, tirelessly working together with this partnership along JobDoc and Lounge to make or provide more people the ability or the opportunity, better said, to be able to land a remote job for a United States-based business. So with that being said, I'm open to any questions.